You vanished last night, completely, and the night before that, and you'll vanish again tonight. Not metaphorically. Actually, there's a place you go every single night, where everything you think you are simply ceases to be. Your memories dissolve. Your personality evaporates. The story you've been telling yourself about who you are, gone, completely. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, stretching in the sunlight, reaching for your phone, you will have absolutely no memory that you were ever not there. But here's what will haunt you once you see it. You weren't unconscious. You were something else entirely. Something stranger. Something that challenges everything we think we know about what it means to be aware. This isn't about dreams. No, this is about that other thing. That vast darkness between the dreams. The place where you vanish so completely that when someone asks you what you experienced, you can only say, nothing. I experienced nothing. But how do you know? How can you be so certain you experienced nothing if you weren't there to experience the nothing? That's the fracture in reality we're going to peer into. Because what if I told you that the deepest mystery of human consciousness isn't hidden in mystical texts or buried in quantum equations? It's waiting for you every night, in your own bed, in the space between who you were when you closed your eyes and who you'll be when you open them again. Take a moment and think about what happens to you during the deepest part of the night, the part you never notice. Not the dreams, not the drifting thoughts. I mean the stretch of time you never witness, the blank interval you only infer afterward. You close your eyes, and then you're back, a jump cut, a splice in the film of your life. And whatever happened in between, you have no access to it, no memory, no trace, just the intuition that something must have occurred because time passed and your body stayed alive. But here's the paradox that philosopher Evan Thompson keeps circling in his work. How can you be so certain you experienced nothing if there was no you there to experience the nothing? To report the absence of experience, you'd need to have been present to witness that absence. But you weren't. The very structure that creates your sense of being someone, your I, had dissolved. Thompson calls this the fundamental question of consciousness. What remains when the self temporarily ceases to exist? Not in death, in sleep, every single night. When people report fainting, that moment when consciousness suddenly cuts out, they describe something stranger than simple darkness. Darkness is still something you experience. This is different. One moment they're standing, the next moment they're on the floor, and between those moments there's a void so complete that memory itself cannot form around it. A gap in existence, not remembered as blackness, not remembered at all, just gone. And yet the brain was functioning the entire time. Blood flowing, neurons firing, the body maintaining homeostasis, all the machinery of life continuing. But the person, that collection of memories and preferences and fears and hopes that thinks of itself as me, had temporarily stopped existing. This is what researchers at the University of Liège discovered when they studied people in the deepest stages of sleep. Using functional MRI machines, they watched something remarkable happen in the brain. There's a network, they call it the default mode network, that essentially functions as the brain's sense of self. It's the neural signature of you, the thing that maintains your autobiography, that holds together your sense of being a continuous person moving through time. And in deep sleep, it fragments, it comes apart. The connections between its parts, particularly between the frontal regions and everything else, they just disconnect. You disappear. not into darkness, into something for which we barely have language. The ancient philosophers of India knew about this place. They didn't have fMRI machines, but they had something else. Thousands of years of systematic investigation into the nature of consciousness itself. In the Advaita Vedanta tradition, they recognized three states of normal human experience. Jagrat, the waking state. You, right now, listening to these words, thinking your thoughts, feeling your feelings. The world presenting itself as solid, real, external. Svapna, the dream state. The mind creating its own reality, experiencing events that never happen, meeting people who don't exist, and believing completely, while it's happening, that it's all real. And then Susupti, deep dreamless sleep, the state about which the ancient texts say something that sounds like a paradox until you understand it. In this state, consciousness continues, but the individual ego dissolves. You're still there, but the you isn't. The 8th century philosopher Adi Shankara wrote that during Susupti, the self rests in itself, in complete and splendid isolation. The false identifications of waking life, I am this body, I am this person, I am this story, they all fall away. What remains is what was always there underneath, pure awareness. Consciousness aware of itself without needing anything to be conscious of. He called it turiya when it could be recognized even in waking life. The 4th state. Not waking, not dreaming, not deep sleep, but the substrate that allows all three to exist. The screen on which all experiences play, but which isn't itself an experience. And here's where it gets strange. You touch this state every single night. You merge with it completely. But memory doesn't pass through. The ordinary mind, built to navigate waking reality, has no mechanism to encode or retrieve what happens in that place. It's like trying to take a photograph of the camera itself. Let's talk about what we can measure. In one well-known 2009 PNAS study by Horowitz and colleagues, participants were pushed into deep sleep inside an fMRI scanner, in some cases after extended sleep deprivation. What they found was architectural. The default mode network, that symphony of brain regions that maintains your sense of being a continuous self, it didn't shut off. The individual regions kept firing, kept active, but the coherence between them, particularly the connections between the frontal cortex and everything else, it dramatically weakened. It's like an orchestra where every musician is still playing, but they've all stopped listening to each other. The music disintegrates not through silence, but through disconnection. And this, they realized, this might be what the loss of consciousness actually is. Not the brain turning off, but the brain's integration breaking down. The unified field of awareness fragmenting into separate processes that no longer know about each other. Giulio Tononi, the neuroscientist behind integrated information theory, would later argue that consciousness itself is integration. That awareness exists in proportion to how much information a system can integrate. Put simply, you are conscious to the degree that the different parts of your experience form a unified whole. The redness of red, the taste of coffee, the feeling of your body in the chair, the voice contemplating all of this, all of it bound together into a single, irreducible experience of now. In deep sleep, that integration comes apart. Not completely, you're still alive, still breathing, still maintaining homeostasis, but the kind of integration that creates your sense of being a person moving through time, that dissolves. And yet, and this is the strange part, something remains. Something continues. People can be awakened from the deepest sleep and report a sense of having been somewhere, not dreaming, not unconscious in the way fainting feels, but present in a way that leaves no trace. There's another place where people report touching this territory, at the boundary between life and death. Near-death experiences get all the attention: the tunnel of light, the deceased relatives, the life review. But there's a subset of these experiences that researchers Nancy Evans Bush and Bruce Grayson documented that tells a different story. This phenomenon would later come to be known as void experiences. The person stops breathing, the heart stops beating. They're clinically dead. And some of them, not many, but enough to establish a pattern, report being plunged into something they can only describe as an infinite emptiness, not darkness. Darkness is still something. This is more fundamental, an ontological void, pure existence without content. One woman described it as being alone in a black room with your eyes wide open, not experiencing darkness, but experiencing the absence of everything while still being present as awareness itself. Terrifying for some, peaceful for others, but consistent in one detail: the sense of being conscious while having nothing to be conscious of except consciousness itself. And here's what's disturbing. These experiences happen when brain activity should be minimal or absent entirely, when the default mode network should be completely offline, when, by every measurable standard, consciousness shouldn't be possible. Yet something persists, something observes, something knows. The neuroscientist Sam Parnia, who studies what happens to consciousness during cardiac arrest, suggests that what we're seeing is the brain's normal inhibitory systems failing. In ordinary life, he proposes, consciousness is actually filtered, constrained, narrowed down to the thin beam of awareness we need to function. But when the brain starts dying, those filters break down, and the full spectrum of consciousness floods through, including states so fundamental that we have no evolved mechanism to remember them. This matches eerily with what the contemplative traditions have always said, that ordinary waking consciousness is actually a reduction, a narrowing, a focusing down of something much vaster. That what we call being awake is actually a specific, limited form of consciousness that's useful for survival, but isn't the whole picture. Let's go deeper into the mystic territories. When John Van Alken, a scholar of mysticism, describes his experience in deep meditation, he talks about entering what he calls the void. He writes, "I lost all sense of individualness. It was as if my consciousness turned off a gravitational force that somehow maintained selfness, allowing my mind to slip into an infinite vacuum, much like the difference between a contained planetary atmosphere and infinite airless outer space." This is the same territory PMH Atwater, a researcher of near-death experiences, describes encountering. She writes about it as a loving nothingness, a living dark, not empty in the sense of lacking something, but full in a way that transcends content. Everything and nothing simultaneously. A shimmering potential that contains all possibilities but expresses none. The Buddhist traditions have mapped this terrain in remarkable detail. They distinguish between different grades of emptiness, different depths of dissolution. There's the emptiness of no self, realizing that what you thought was you is actually a process, not a thing. Then there's the emptiness of phenomena, recognizing that all experiences are transparent, without inherent existence. And then there's the emptiness that's beyond even these concepts, what they call the emptiness of emptiness. And in their practices, in deep jhanas, profound meditative states, practitioners report touching a place they call neither perception nor non-perception, A state so subtle that you can't quite call it consciousness, and you can't quite call it unconsciousness. You're there, but the normal machinery of selfhood has completely stopped. What all these maps agree on, whether they come from neuroscience labs or meditation caves or hospital emergency rooms, is this. There's a level of consciousness that exists before the self does. A ground state, a fundamental mode of awareness that doesn't require memory, personality, or even the sense of being someone having an experience. And we touch it every night. Here's the maddening thing. We can't remember it. The Advaita masters explain this with an analogy. Deep sleep is like a mirror that reflects perfectly, but has no memory of what it reflected. Consciousness is there, fully present, but without the mental structures that create memory, it leaves no trace in the waking mind. As Ramana Maharshi often suggested in his dialogues, deep sleep is not a state of ignorance, but a glimpse of one's pure nature. While waking life is full of conceptual ignorance, he argued that there is a kind of full awareness in sleep, though not the kind the waking mind can remember. Wait. Take a moment to feel the weight of those words. He's claiming that what we call being awake is actually a form of ignorance, and what we call deep sleep is actually a form of pure awareness. How can that possibly make sense? It makes sense if consciousness isn't what we think it is, if consciousness isn't the thoughts and feelings and sensations we're aware of, but is instead the awareness itself, the space in which all experiences appear and disappear. The screen, not the movie. Modern neuroscience is beginning to circle this same insight from a different direction. Research on the default mode network shows that it's most active when we're lost in thought, mind-wandering, rehearsing the past, planning the future, maintaining our autobiography. It's the neural correlate of the selfing process, the constant background hum of me and mine. And when that network fragments in deep sleep, when those connections temporarily dissolve, what's actually happening might not be the loss of consciousness, but the loss of the illusion that consciousness requires a self to be conscious. What remains is awareness without an owner, consciousness without anyone being conscious. The philosopher Thomas Metzinger calls this the consciousness of being nobody. The neuroscientist Giulio Tononi might call it maximally diffuse integration. The mystic calls it God. The poet calls it the void. The neuroscientist calls it an altered state. But they're all pointing at the same absence that isn't quite absence. So where are you when you don't exist? You're in the one place you can never leave, awareness itself. The ancient traditions weren't being mystical when they claimed you're always conscious, even in deep sleep. They were being precise. They had discovered through direct investigation what neuroscience is now circling from the outside. That consciousness isn't a thing that turns on and off. It's the constant in which everything else, including the sense of self, appears and disappears. You don't become conscious when you wake up. Consciousness reveals itself through a new structure. The default mode network reconnects. The fragments of selfhood reassemble. Memory comes back online. And suddenly there's someone there again. Someone who thinks they just woke up from nothing. But the nothing you returned from wasn't nothing. It was everything before it became something. It was consciousness in its ground state, pure, undifferentiated, free from the burden of being anyone in particular. The neuroscientist Anil Seth has a phrase for this. He calls ordinary waking consciousness a controlled hallucination. Your brain's best guess about reality, constantly updated by sensory input, but fundamentally a construct. A story, a model. What if deep sleep is what happens when that model temporarily stops running? Not because consciousness stops, but because the modeling process stops. You're still there. Awareness is still present. But the machinery that creates you as a constructed self has powered down for maintenance. Let's be honest. You will never solve this mystery from the outside. No study, no experiment, no brain scan will give you the answer. Because the answer is not in the data, it's in the experience. And the experience is inaccessible to the waking mind. But here's the part that changes everything. What if that inaccessibility is itself a clue? What if the reason you can't remember deep sleep is not that nothing happened, but that something so profound happened that your ordinary consciousness can't hold it? What if every night you touch something infinite and your finite mind just can't carry it back? There's a reason mystics across cultures describe enlightenment as waking up. It's not metaphorical. They mean it literally. They're saying that what you call waking life is still a kind of sleep, a dream mistaken for reality. And the state you dismiss as unconscious deep sleep might actually be the closest you get, every single night, to the ground of being. Here's the final twist. If consciousness persists in deep sleep, even in some minimal, contentless form, if there's an awareness that watches the waking mind appear and disappear, watches the dream mind appear and disappear, watches even the sense of I appear and disappear, then the question, where do we go when we sleep without dreams, is the wrong question. Because you don't go anywhere. You were never not here. You just forgot what here means. Every night, you lay your head down and dissolve. The person you were, your name, your history, your worries, evaporates into slow waves. And for hours, you are something else. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe the awareness that contains both nothing and everything without being either. And then the alarm goes off. You reconstruct yourself from memory fragments. You believe you're continuous. You believe you were gone. You believe you came back. But what if you never left? What if the deepest sleep is the most awake you ever are? And you just can't remember it because the one who remembers wasn't there. That would mean every morning you wake up not into consciousness, but out of it. You wake up into forgetting. You wake up into the dream of being a person. And tonight, when you close your eyes and descend into that fathomless dark, you'll do it again. You'll vanish. You'll dissolve. And somewhere beneath the threshold of memory, beneath the machinery of thought, beneath the narrative of self, something will remain. And that is what you truly are.